Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent their evenings at the mall or gossiping about boys, she could be found at the local gym, perfecting her form on the heavy bag or running endless miles through the dusty streets. Her father, a retired Marine sergeant, had instilled in her a discipline and drive that set her apart from her peers. The decision to join the Navy came during her senior year of high school, when a recruiter visited their school. As he spoke about honor, courage, and commitment, something inside Sarah awakened. She knew this was her path, even though everyone around her questioned whether a girl from their quiet town could handle military life. Her mother cried when Sarah announced her decision at dinner that evening. "The military is no place for a young woman," she pleaded, her voice breaking. But her father simply nodded, a look of pride mixed with concern crossing his weathered face. He had seen enough in his own service to know what lay ahead for his daughter. Basic training at Great Lakes Naval Station was everything Sarah had expected, and more. The drill instructors were relentless, the physical demands crushing, and the mental pressure constant. But she thrived in the structured environment, excelling in every challenge thrown her way. Her fellow recruits initially doubted her abilities, but she quickly proved herself through her unwavering determination and natural leadership skills. During her time in basic training, Sarah heard whispers about the Navy SEALs. The elite Special Operations Force was shrouded in mystery and legend, with stories of their incredible feats circulating among the recruits like folklore. Most dismissed the idea of ever joining their ranks as pure fantasy, but Sarah found herself drawn to the challenge. After graduation, Sarah was assigned to Naval Station Norfolk, where she served as a quartermaster aboard a guided missile destroyer. The work was demanding, requiring precise navigation and seamless coordination with the ship's crew. She excelled in her role, earning commendations from her superiors and the respect of her shipmates. But something was missing. The routine of shipboard life, while important, didn't satisfy the burning desire for something greater that had driven her to the military in the first place. Late at night, during her watch shifts, she would stare out at the endless ocean and dream of pushing beyond the ordinary limits that seemed to constrain everyone around her. The opportunity came during her second deployment, when a guest lecturer visited their ship. Commander James Mitchell was a decorated Navy SEAL who had served multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. His presence commanded immediate attention from everyone in the room as he spoke about the reality of special operations warfare. "The SEALs aren't looking for superheroes," he explained to the assembled sailors. "We're looking for ordinary people who refuse to accept ordinary limitations. People who understand that the only easy day was yesterday, and who are willing to pay any price to accomplish the mission." After his presentation, Sarah approached Commander Mitchell with a directness that surprised even herself. "Sir, I want to try for the teams," she said, her voice steady despite the nervousness she felt inside. Mitchell studied her for a long moment, taking in her confident posture and the determination in her eyes. "What makes you think you have what it takes?" he asked. Sarah had been preparing for this question for months. "Because I've never met a challenge I couldn't overcome, and I've never found a limit I couldn't push past. I know I'm not the biggest or the strongest, but I'll outwork anyone and I'll never quit." The commander nodded slowly. "The Navy recently opened all combat roles to women, including the SEALs. But I'll tell you right now, the standards won't change. The training will break you down in ways you can't imagine. Most men don't make it through. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Without hesitation, Sarah replied, "I've been ready my whole life." The paperwork process was extensive and intimidating. Physical fitness tests, psychological evaluations, background checks, and medical examinations all had to be completed before she could even be considered for the screening test. Sarah threw herself into preparation with an intensity that worried her shipmates. She began each day with a 5-mile run before her regular duties, followed by hours in the ship's gym working on strength training and calisthenics. She studied everything she could find about SEAL training, learning about the physical and mental challenges that awaited her. The more she learned, the more determined she became. Her commanding officer initially tried to discourage her application. Martinez, you're an excellent sailor with a bright future ahead of you. Why risk throwing it all away on something that's probably impossible? But Sarah's mind was made up, and eventually, her persistence wore down the resistance. The notification came through official channels 6 months later. Sarah had been accepted for the physical screening test, the first hurdle in the long journey toward becoming a Navy SEAL. The test would take place at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado in California, the home of SEAL training. As her ship pulled into port in San Diego, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that she had never experienced before. This was the moment she had been working toward for over a year, and there would be no second chances. The screening test was held on a foggy morning at Coronado Beach. Sarah found herself among a group of 25 candidates, all but 2 of whom were men. The other woman, a tall blonde from Seattle named Jennifer, seemed just as nervous as Sarah felt. The test began with a timed 4-mile run on the beach, where the soft sand made every step a struggle. Sarah had trained for this, but the pace set by the instructors was brutal. Several candidates fell behind early, gasping for air as they struggled to keep up. Next came the swimming portion, a 1,000-meter swim in the frigid Pacific Ocean. The water was so cold that Sarah's muscles seized up within the first 100 meters, but she forced herself to maintain her stroke technique and rhythm. The instructors followed alongside in small boats, their eyes never leaving the struggling candidates. The calisthenics portion tested maximum repetitions of push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups within specific time limits. Sarah had always been strong for her size, but watching some of the larger male candidates effortlessly exceed the minimum standards made her realize just how challenging the road ahead would be. By the end of the day, only 18 candidates remained. Sarah had passed every portion of the test, though not by comfortable margins. As she stood on the beach, soaking wet and exhausted, one of the instructors approached her. "You made it through today," he said, his expression unreadable. "But this was the easy part. If you think you're ready for basic underwater demolitions/SEAL training, report to the quarterdeck Monday morning at 0500. And understand this, from that moment forward, your life will belong to us." That weekend, Sarah called her parents to share the news. Her mother cried again, but this time there were tears of pride mixed with the fear. Her father simply said, "I knew you could do it, kiddo. Now show them what you're really made of." As Sunday evening approached, Sarah lay in her temporary quarters at Coronado, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. Tomorrow, she would begin the most challenging experience of her life. She had heard the stories about BUD/S training, the brutal physical demands, the sleep deprivation, the constant pressure designed to break even the strongest candidates. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sarah felt nothing but determination. She had come too far and sacrificed too much to turn back now. Whatever trials awaited her in the weeks ahead, she would face them with the same unwavering resolve that had carried her this far. The alarm clock would ring in just a few hours, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Sarah Martinez was ready to prove that she had what it took to join the ranks of the most elite warriors in the world. The only question that remained was whether the training would be ready for her. Outside her window, the Pacific Ocean crashed against the shore in an endless rhythm, as it had for countless generations of warriors who had walked this path before her. Tomorrow, Sarah would join their ranks and begin the ultimate test of her physical and mental limits. She closed her eyes and tried to rest, knowing that easy days were now behind her forever. The 0500 wake-up call came like a thunderclap in the darkness. Sarah bolted upright in her rack, her heart already racing before her feet hit the cold concrete floor. Around her, 23 other candidates stumbled through the same ritual, the silence of the early morning broken only by the sound of gear being hastily assembled and boots hitting the deck. BUD/S Class 347 had officially begun. Instructor Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez stood at the front of the classroom, his presence filling the space with an almost tangible intensity. His dark eyes swept across the assembled candidates like a searchlight, cataloging weaknesses and measuring resolve. When his gaze fell on Sarah, she felt as though he was looking straight through her, seeing things about herself that she hadn't yet discovered. Welcome to Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training, Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. For the next 6 months, this place will be your heaven and your hell. Some of you think you know what you've signed up for. You're wrong. None of you truly understand what lies ahead. He began to pace back and forth, his boots clicking against the polished floor in a rhythm that seemed to match the elevated heartbeats of every person in the room. Look around you. Take a good look at the faces next to you. Statistically, only 4 or 5 of you will be here at graduation. The rest will have quit, been dropped for medical reasons, or failed to meet our standards. Sarah glanced sideways at the candidate next to her, a muscular young man from Ohio whose confidence seemed to radiate from every pore. He caught her looking and gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement. In 6 months, would either of them still be here? The first week was designed to establish the baseline of what would be expected. Physical training began before dawn and continued throughout the day, broken only by classroom instruction on topics ranging from maritime navigation to explosive ordnance disposal. The academic load was intense, but it was the physical demands that began to separate the truly committed from those who had simply thought they were ready. Sarah quickly learned that her preparation, extensive as it had been, was barely adequate for the minimum standards. The daily PT sessions pushed every candidate to their absolute limits and then demanded more. 4-mile runs in the soft sand became routine, followed by hours in the surf performing calisthenics while being battered by the cold Pacific waves. The instructors were relentless in their pursuit of perfection. Every movement was scrutinized, every technique dissected and corrected. Failure to meet standards resulted in additional training, known euphemistically as extra instruction, which usually involved hours of additional physical exercise performed while the rest of the class was eating or sleeping. By the end of the second week, 3 candidates had already rung the bell, the brass ship's bell that stood prominently in the center of the compound, symbolizing surrender, and the end of a candidate's SEAL aspirations. Each time someone quit, the remaining candidates were forced to witness the ceremony, watching as another dream died and serving as a stark reminder of the price of failure. Sarah found herself struggling with aspects of the training that seemed to come naturally to others. The swimming portions were particularly challenging, not because she lacked technique, but because the cold water and the stress of performance under observation seemed to sap her strength more quickly than it affected her male counterparts. During one particularly brutal surf passage exercise, where candidates were required to carry heavy rubber boats through pounding waves, Sarah found herself separated from her boat crew and struggling against a riptide that threatened to pull her out to sea. The safety swimmers were positioned nearby, ready to assist, but Sarah knew that accepting help would likely mean the end of her training. She fought against the current with every ounce of strength she possessed, her lungs burning as she tried to maintain her position. Just when she thought she might have to signal for assistance, she felt a strong hand grip her arm. It was Peterson, the confident candidate from Ohio, who had somehow managed to position himself to provide support without making it obvious to the instructors. "Stay with me," he whispered through the roar of the surf. "We move together." Together, they managed to rejoin their boat crew and complete the exercise. That night, as they cleaned their gear and prepared for the next day's trials, Peterson approached Sarah with a serious expression. "You saved my ass out there," Sarah said quietly. Peterson shook his head. "We're a team. That's what teams do. But I need to tell you something. Some of the guys are talking. They think you're going to be a liability, that having women in the teams will compromise operations." Sarah felt a familiar fire building in her chest. "What do you think?" "I think anyone who can keep fighting when they're about to drown probably has the heart for this job. But you're going to have to prove it to them every single day. They're not going to give you any breaks because you're a woman, and they're sure as hell not going to make it easy for you." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of boots on the barracks floor. Instructor Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Martinez. Peterson. My office. Now." They followed him to a small office overlooking the training compound. Through the window, Sarah could see the obstacle course where they had spent countless hours, the the wooden structures dark and imposing against the night sky. "I saw what happened out there today," Rodriguez said without preamble. "Teamwork is essential, but so is individual competence. Martinez, you're struggling with some of the water portions. That's not unusual, but it's something that needs to be addressed before Hell Week." Hell Week. The legendary 5th week of training when candidates would be pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance. Sleep deprivation, constant physical activity, and relentless pressure designed to break the will of all but the most determined individuals. I want both of you to report for additional swimming instruction every evening after regular training. You'll work with Instructor Thompson on technique and endurance. This is not a punishment, it's an investment in your success. Over the next several weeks, Sarah spent her evenings in the pool with Thompson, a former SEAL who had competed at the Olympic level before joining the teams. Under his guidance, her swimming improved dramatically, but more importantly, she began to understand the mental aspects of performing under pressure. "The water doesn't care about your fears," Thompson told her during one late-night session. "It doesn't care about your doubts or your physical limitations. The only thing that matters is your will to keep moving forward. Master that, and the technique will follow." The training continued to escalate in intensity and complexity. Land warfare exercises took the candidates into the mountains east of San Diego, where they learned small unit tactics and weapons handling. The academic load increased proportionally, with tests on subjects ranging from military history to advanced mathematics. Sarah found herself developing an unexpected friendship with Jennifer, the other female candidate. Despite their different backgrounds, Jennifer had been a college athlete before joining the Navy. They shared a common understanding of the unique pressures they faced as women in an overwhelmingly male environment. "Sometimes I feel like I'm representing every woman who ever wanted to do this job," Jennifer confided during a rare moment of downtime. "Like if I fail, I'm proving that women don't belong here." Sarah understood the feeling completely. The weight of expectation was enormous, not just from the instructors and their fellow candidates, but from the media attention that their presence had generated. They were pioneers in a very real sense, breaking barriers that had stood for decades. As Hell Week approached, the attrition rate began to accelerate. More bells were rung, more dreams abandoned. The class that had started with 24 candidates was now down to 16, and the instructors made it clear that the real test was yet to come. The night before Hell Week began, Sarah lay in her rack listening to the sound of the ocean outside. In less than 12 hours, she would face the most challenging experience of her life. Everything she had endured up to this point had been preparation for the next 5 days. She thought about her father, and the pride she had heard in his voice during their last phone conversation. She thought about Peterson and the other candidates who had become her brothers in arms. Most of all, she thought about the little girl from Texas who had dreamed of becoming something extraordinary. The alarm would sound soon, signaling the beginning of Hell Week. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to center herself, knowing that the next 5 days would test every aspect of her character and determination. She had come too far to fail now, but she also understood that wanting something desperately was no guarantee of success. Outside, the Pacific waves continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to the human drama that was about to unfold on the shores of Coronado. In a few hours, Sarah Martinez would discover whether she truly had what it took to earn her place among the elite warriors of the Navy SEALs. The crucible was about to begin, and there would be no mercy for anyone who couldn't stand the heat. Hell Week began at precisely 2,200 hours on a Sunday night with the sound of machine gun fire and explosive charges detonating around the barracks. Sarah jerked awake to find instructors wearing camouflage paint rushing through the building, shouting orders and dragging candidates from their racks. The simulation of a combat scenario was so realistic that for a moment, her sleep-deprived mind couldn't distinguish between training and actual warfare. "Move! Move! Move!" Instructor Rodriguez screamed as he kicked over lockers and threw gear across the room. "This is not a drill. You are under attack. Get your gear and get to the grinder." Sarah stumbled through the chaos, her hands shaking as she tried to gather her equipment. Around her, candidates scrambled to respond to the sudden transition from peaceful sleep to combat simulation. This was Breakout, the terrifying beginning of the most grueling week in military training. The grinder, a large asphalt courtyard in the center of the training compound, had been transformed into a scene from a war movie. Smoke machines filled the air with thick gray clouds, strobe lights created disorienting flashes, and the sound of simulated gunfire echoed off the surrounding buildings. The 16 remaining candidates found themselves facing a gauntlet of instructors who seemed determined to create maximum chaos and confusion. For the next 6 hours, they were subjected to a relentless series of physical and mental challenges. Boat crews raced across the beach carrying 300-pound rubber rafts, performed countless repetitions of calisthenics in the frigid surf, and endured continuous harassment from instructors who probed for any sign of weakness or surrender. By dawn, 2 more candidates had quit. Jennifer was among them. Sarah watched in stunned silence as her friend approached the brass bell, her face streaked with tears and sand. The sound of the bell ringing seemed to echo across the entire compound, a funeral dirge for another shattered dream. Jennifer caught Sarah's eye as she walked past, heading toward the medical tent where quitters were processed out of the program. "Don't let them break you," Jennifer whispered as she passed. "Someone has to make it." The loss of Jennifer hit Sarah harder than she had expected. They had supported each other through the darkest moments of training, sharing the unique burden of being women in an environment designed to test the limits of traditionally male-dominated warrior culture. Now Sarah was alone, the only woman left in a class that was rapidly dwindling. The remaining candidates were divided into 3 boat crews of 4 to 5 men each. Sarah found herself assigned to Boat Crew 2, along with Peterson, Williams, a quiet former Marine from North Carolina, Chen, a brilliant navigation specialist from California, and Jackson, a powerful swimmer from Florida who had played college football. As the only woman, Sarah immediately felt the weight of additional scrutiny. Every mistake she made seemed magnified, every moment of weakness examined under a microscope. Some of the candidates from other boat crews made no effort to hide their skepticism about her presence, muttering comments just loud enough for her to hear. The second day of Hell Week introduced log PT, a series of exercises performed while carrying telephone pole-sized logs that weighed several hundred pounds. The logs required perfect coordination between crew members, and any breakdown in teamwork resulted in punishment for the entire group. During one particularly brutal session, Sarah's boat crew was struggling to keep pace with the others. The combination of sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, and the awkward weight distribution of the log was taking its toll on everyone. As they attempted to press the log overhead for the 50th time, Sarah's arms began to shake uncontrollably. "I can't hold it," she gasped, her muscles screaming in protest. "Yes, you can," Peterson growled through gritted teeth. "We all hold it or none of us hold it." But Sarah's strength was failing. The log began to tilt as her arms gave way, threatening to crush one of her teammates. In that moment, Williams shifted his grip to compensate for her weakness, taking more of the weight onto his own shoulders. Instructor Rodriguez noticed the adjustment immediately. His whistle pierced the air, bringing all activity to a halt. "Boat Crew 2! Front and center!" They dropped the log and rushed to stand at attention before the instructor, their chests heaving from exertion. Rodriguez walked slowly down the line, examining each candidate with the intensity of a predator studying potential prey. "It appears we have a weak link," he announced loudly enough for all the other candidates to hear. "Williams, why did you adjust your grip?" Williams stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. "No excuse, Instructor Rodriguez. That's not what I asked. I asked why you compromised the integrity of the exercise to compensate for your teammates' failure." Sarah felt every eye on the compound focused on her. This was the moment she had dreaded since the beginning of training, becoming a liability to her teammates, proving the doubters right about women in combat roles. But Williams never wavered. "Because we're a team, Instructor. Teams don't leave anyone behind." Rodriguez studied Williams for a long moment, then shifted his attention to Sarah. "Martinez, your teammate just sacrificed his own performance to cover for your weakness. What do you have to say about that?" Sarah knew this was a test, not just of her physical capabilities but of her character and leadership potential. The easy answer would be to accept the help and move on. But she also knew that would undermine everything she was trying to prove. Permission to speak freely, Instructor Rodriguez? Granted. Williams is right that teams don't leave anyone behind. But teams also don't carry dead weight. If I can't pull my own load, then I don't belong here. I request permission to attempt the exercise again, without assistance. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Around the compound, other candidates and instructors had stopped their activities to watch the confrontation unfold. In the sudden silence, the sound of waves crashing on the nearby beach seemed unnaturally loud. You want to try again? After you already failed? I want to succeed, Instructor. Not just survive. Rodriguez considered this for several seconds, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded toward the log. Boat crew 2, take your positions. Martinez, you will perform 10 overhead presses with that log. If you fail to complete all 10 repetitions, you and your entire crew will spend the next 4 hours in the surf zone performing extra instruction. If you succeed, you'll join the other crews for chow. Sarah took her position at the log, feeling the rough wood against her palms. Her teammates flanked her, their faces grim but supportive. She could sense the doubt radiating from the other candidates, the expectation that she would fail and drag her crew down with her. The first rep was manageable. The second harder. By the 5th repetition, her arms were on fire and her vision was beginning to blur from the combination of exhaustion and determination. The log felt like it was getting heavier with each lift, the weight pressing down on her like the expectations of everyone watching. Rep 6. Rep 7. Her entire body was shaking now, not just her arms. Sweat poured into her eyes, mixing with salt spray from the nearby ocean. She could hear Peterson counting under his breath, encouraging her to keep going. Rep 8. Rep 9. The 10th repetition seemed impossible. Her muscles had moved beyond pain into a realm of pure exhaustion where only willpower could provide the strength to continue. She pressed upward with everything she had, feeling the log rise inch by agonizing inch toward full extension. At the top, her arms locked out and held for the required 2-second count. Then, she lowered the log with control, completing the final repetition. The compound erupted in cheers from her boat crew, while other candidates nodded with grudging respect. Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression still neutral. Outstanding, Martinez. You just learned something important about what you're capable of when everything is on the line. That night, as the candidates tried to catch a few minutes of sleep while sitting upright against the seawall, Peterson leaned over to Sarah. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Williams had your back. Sarah nodded, too exhausted to speak but understanding the deeper meaning of his words. She had proven something important, not just to the instructors and her fellow candidates, but to herself. When the moment came to either accept help or rise to the challenge, she had chosen to fight. The third day brought underwater exercises that pushed the candidates to the very edge of their comfort zones. Pool competency involved having their scuba gear torn off underwater by instructors, then having to recover and reassemble it while holding their breath. Several candidates panicked during the exercise, surfacing prematurely and earning automatic failure. Sarah approached the pool with a calm determination that surprised even herself. The weeks of extra training with Instructor Thompson had given her not just technical proficiency in the water, but a mental toughness that allowed her to remain focused even when her lungs were screaming for air. As the instructor yanked her mask off and pulled the regulator from her mouth, Sarah forced herself to remain calm. She methodically recovered her equipment, cleared her mask, and resumed breathing, all while maintaining the controlled movements that Thompson had drilled into her during their evening sessions. When she surfaced, she could see approval in the instructor's eyes. She had passed another test, overcome another barrier that had stopped other candidates. By the 4th day of Hell Week, the class had been reduced to just 11 candidates. The constant physical demands, sleep deprivation, and psychological pressure were taking their toll on everyone. Hallucinations were common as exhausted minds struggled to process reality. Some candidates began talking to people who weren't there, others forgot basic information like their own names. Sarah found herself in a strange state of clarity that seemed to come from having pushed beyond the normal limits of human endurance. Her body was running on pure adrenaline and determination, her mind focused on a single objective, completing Hell Week and earning her place in the next phase of training. The final exercise of Hell Week was a night mission that required boat crews to navigate several miles offshore, conduct a simulated reconnaissance of a target, and return before dawn. The mission would test everything they had learned about teamwork, navigation, and combat skills. As boat crew 2 prepared for the mission, Sarah felt a sense of unity with her teammates that she had never experienced before. They had been through hell together, literally and figuratively, and had emerged as a cohesive unit. The initial doubts about her capabilities had been replaced by mutual respect and trust. The mission went flawlessly. Working together with precision born of shared hardship, they completed their objectives and returned to base ahead of schedule. As they pulled their boat up onto the beach in the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed in how she was perceived by her peers. She was no longer the woman trying to prove she belonged. She was simply a member of the team. Hell Week officially ended at noon on Friday with a brief ceremony attended by SEAL officers and senior instructors. The 11 remaining candidates stood at attention, their uniforms cleaned for the first time in 5 days, as the commanding officer addressed them. Ladies and gentlemen, you have completed the most challenging phase of BUD/S training. You have proven that you possess the mental toughness and physical capability necessary to continue in this program. But remember, this is not the end. This is merely the beginning of your journey toward becoming a Navy SEAL. As the candidates were dismissed to begin the recovery period between Hell Week and the next phase of training, Rodriguez approached Sarah privately. Martinez, I want you to know that you've exceeded every expectation we had when you arrived here. You've proven that dedication and heart can overcome any physical disadvantage. But I need to warn you, the challenges ahead are different but no less demanding. Stay focused, stay hungry, and never let success make you complacent. That evening, Sarah called her parents to share the news that she had survived Hell Week. Her mother cried tears of joy and relief, while her father's voice carried a pride that made Sarah's own eyes fill with tears. I always knew you had what it takes, he said. Now show them what a Martinez can really accomplish. As she hung up the phone and prepared for a well-deserved night's sleep, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from the small-town girl with big dreams. Hell Week had stripped away every pretense, every excuse, every limitation she had ever placed on herself. What remained was the core of who she truly was, a warrior in every sense of the word. The hardest part was behind her, but the most dangerous challenges still lay ahead. Soon she would enter the advanced phases of SEAL training, where the focus would shift from basic survival to the complex skills needed for special operations warfare. But tonight she was simply grateful to have proven that she belonged among the elite warriors of the Navy SEALs. Tomorrow would bring new trials, but tonight she could rest with the knowledge that she had passed the ultimate test of her determination and spirit. 6 months after Hell Week, Sarah Martinez stood on the deck of a Navy destroyer somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, adjusting her combat gear as the sun dipped below the horizon. The advanced phases of SEAL training had pushed her beyond anything she had experienced during BUD/S, teaching her skills in diving, land warfare, and demolitions that transformed her from a determined candidate into a lethal special operations warrior. She was no longer the woman fighting to prove she belonged. She was Petty Officer Martinez, fully qualified Navy SEAL, assigned to SEAL Team 7 based out of Coronado. The trident pin on her uniform had been earned through blood, sweat, and an unwavering determination that had carried her through 24 months of the most demanding military training in the world. Tonight's mission was her first real combat operation, a hostage rescue in the Philippines where American civilians had been captured by a terrorist organization with ties to international crime syndicates. The intelligence was solid, the target identified, and the window of opportunity narrow. Everything Sarah had trained for over the past 2 years would be put to the ultimate test. Martinez, you're with Alpha Team on the primary breach. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chin announced during the final briefing. Chin was a veteran SEAL officer with 3 combat deployments under her belt, and she had specifically requested Sarah for this operation after reviewing her training records. Sarah nodded, checking her weapons and equipment one final time. Her M4 carbine was clean and properly zeroed, her sidearm secure in its holster, and her breaching charges checked and rechecked. Around her, the other members of Alpha Team went through their own pre-mission rituals with the calm professionalism of warriors who had done this many times before. Peterson was there, now a petty officer 2nd class and one of the most respected operators in the team. He caught Sarah's eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up, the same gesture of support he had offered during their darkest moments in training. Williams, Chun from her boat crew, and Jackson had all made it through the pipeline as well, though they were assigned to different teams now. The helicopter flight to the target compound was conducted in complete silence, each operator lost in their own thoughts and mental preparations. Sarah had learned during her training that combat missions were paradoxical experiences, months of preparation and planning compressed into minutes of violent action where split-second decisions could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. As they approached the target, Sarah could see the compound clearly through her night vision goggles. The intelligence reports had been accurate, 3 buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with sentries posted at obvious locations. The terrorists had chosen their position well, but they hadn't anticipated facing Navy SEALs. The insertion went perfectly. Using fast rope techniques they had practiced hundreds of times, the team descended from the helicopters into the jungle surrounding the compound, establishing a security perimeter before moving toward their objective. Sarah found herself operating with a clarity and confidence that seemed to come from somewhere outside her normal conscious mind. Alpha Team's mission was to breach the main building where the hostages were believed to be held, while Bravo Team secured the perimeter and Charlie Team eliminated the sentries. The synchronization required was complex, demanding perfect communication and timing between all elements. As they approached the target building, Sarah could see 2 guards standing near the entrance, their weapons casual slung across their shoulders. They were talking quietly, completely unaware that death was approaching them through the jungle's shadows. Through her earpiece, she heard Lieutenant Commander Chen's voice giving final positioning orders. Alpha 1, this is Alpha Lead. You are cleared hot. The takedown was swift and silent. Using suppressed weapons and coordinated movement, the team eliminated the external threats before they could react or raise an alarm. Sarah found herself moving with the fluid precision of a trained predator, every sense heightened and focused on the mission objective. The breach itself required explosive charges to blow the reinforced door of the building. Sarah had earned expert qualifications in demolitions during the advanced training phase, and she quickly placed the shaped charges while her teammates provided security. The explosion, when it came, was perfectly controlled, enough force to destroy the door but not enough to harm the hostages inside. Moving through the breach, Alpha Team found themselves in a dimly lit corridor with multiple rooms branching off on either side. Intelligence had indicated that the hostages were being held in the rear of the building, but they would have to clear each room systematically to ensure no threats were missed. The first room contained sleeping quarters for the guards, empty now because of the guard rotations they had observed during their reconnaissance. The second room was a kitchen and common area, also clear of personnel. But as they approached the third room, Sarah heard voices speaking in a language she recognized as Tagalog mixed with Arabic. Through hand signals, the team coordinated their entry. Sarah took the left side of the doorframe while Peterson took the right, with Williams and Chin providing rear security. On Lieutenant Commander Chen's signal, they moved. The room contained 4 armed men gathered around a table covered with maps and photographs. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. Target identification, threat assessment, and precise engagement happened in milliseconds. Her weapon was trained on the nearest threat before the terrorists even realized they were under attack. Freeze! Hands where we can see them! Peterson shouted in English, knowing that most of the targets would understand the basic command. 2 of the terrorists immediately reached for their weapons. Sarah and Peterson fired simultaneously, their suppressed rifles spitting controlled bursts that dropped both targets instantly. The remaining 2 men surrendered immediately, their hands raised high above their heads. "Room clear," Peterson called out as Williams and Chin moved forward to secure the prisoners. The search for the hostages continued through the remainder of the building. In the final room at the rear, they found what they were looking for: 3 American civilians, 2 men and 1 woman, who had been bound and held in deplorable conditions. The relief on their faces when they saw American uniforms was something Sarah would never forget. "We're United States Navy," she said softly to the woman, who appeared to be in her 30s and was clearly in shock. "You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." The extraction phase of the operation required careful coordination to move the rescued hostages to the helicopter landing zone without exposing them to additional danger. Sarah found herself responsible for the female hostage, who was having difficulty walking due to injuries sustained during her captivity. "Stay close to me," Sarah instructed, placing a protective arm around the woman's shoulders. "We're going to move quickly, but I won't let anything happen to you." As they moved through the jungle toward the extraction point, Sarah maintained constant communication with the other team elements while helping her charge navigate the difficult terrain. The woman, whose name was Rebecca, had been a missionary working in a rural village when she was captured 3 weeks earlier. "I prayed every day that someone would come," Rebecca whispered as they moved through the darkness. "I never gave up hope." "That's what kept you alive," Sarah replied. "Hope and faith are more powerful than any weapon." The helicopter extraction was completed without incident, and within 30 minutes of the initial breach, the entire team was airborne with all hostages safely recovered. The mission had been a complete success. No American casualties, all hostages recovered alive, and valuable intelligence gathered from the captured terrorists. But it was during the post-mission debriefing that Sarah faced her most challenging moment as a Navy SEAL. One of the captured terrorists, during his interrogation, began to focus his attention specifically on Sarah. When he realized that a woman had participated in the assault that had destroyed his organization's operation, his demeanor changed from resigned cooperation to active hostility. "A woman," he spat in broken English. "You send women to fight men's battles now." Lieutenant Commander Chin immediately moved to intervene, but Sarah held up a hand to stop her. She understood that this moment was about more than just one terrorist's opinion. It was about proving, once and for all, that her presence on the team enhanced rather than compromised their capabilities. "I'm a United States Navy SEAL," Sarah said calmly, looking the terrorist directly in the eyes. "My gender is irrelevant. Your organization underestimated us, and that's why you lost." The terrorist's response was swift and violent. Despite being shackled and under guard, he lunged towards Sarah, attempting to grab her throat with his bound hands. His movement was driven by a rage that seemed to come from some deep cultural belief that women should never be warriors. What happened next lasted only seconds but demonstrated everything Sarah had learned during her years of training. As the terrorist's hands reached for her throat, her body reacted with the trained reflexes of a special operations warrior. She stepped back and to the side, breaking the angle of his attack. Her left hand intercepted his arms, controlling his movement, while her right hand delivered a precise strike to a pressure point on his neck. The terrorist dropped immediately, unconscious before he hit the floor. The entire exchange was over before anyone else in the room could react. Peterson, who had been moving to assist, stopped mid-step with an expression of amazement on his face. "Holy shit, Martinez," he breathed. "Where did you learn that?" Sarah looked down at the unconscious terrorist, then at her teammates who were staring at her with expressions of awe and respect. The move she had executed was from an advanced hand-to-hand combat course that only a few SEAL operators had been selected to attend. She had volunteered for the training during her free time, driven by the same determination to excel that had carried her through every other challenge. "I learned it the same place I learned everything else," she replied. "By refusing to accept that good enough was good enough." Lieutenant Commander Chin stepped forward, her expression serious but not disapproving. "That was textbook defensive reaction, Martinez. But next time, call for backup before engaging." "Understood, ma'am." Later that evening, as the team conducted their post-mission maintenance and debriefing, Peterson approached Sarah privately. "You know what you did back there, right?" he asked. Sarah looked up from cleaning her weapon. "I defended myself against an attack." "No." Peterson shook his head. "You proved something that some people still doubted. You showed everyone in that room that you're not just a woman who can keep up with the SEALs, you are a SEAL. Period." The words carried more weight than Peterson probably realized. Since the beginning of her journey, Sarah had been fighting against expectations, stereotypes, and doubts, both from others and from herself. She had proven her physical capabilities during BUD/S, demonstrated her mental toughness during Hell Week, and shown her technical competence during advanced training. But tonight, in a moment of sudden violence, she had proven something more fundamental. When faced with a threat, she had reacted not as a woman trying to prove herself, but as a Navy SEAL protecting herself and her mission. The distinction was subtle but crucial. Over the following months, Sarah participated in numerous other operations, each one building on the experience and confidence gained from that first mission. She specialized in close-quarters battle and hostage rescue operations, earning a reputation for calm professionalism under pressure and innovative tactical thinking. Her success opened doors for other women who wanted to pursue careers in special operations, though Sarah was careful never to present herself as anything more than a professional warrior who happened to be female. The focus, she insisted, should always be on capability and performance, not on gender politics or social statements. 3 years after completing BD/S training, Sarah received orders to report to the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the most elite unit within the SEAL community. She had been selected based purely on her operational record and leadership potential, another milestone in a career that had already broken numerous barriers. As she prepared for this new assignment, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small town in Texas to the highest levels of special operations warfare. The girl who had dreamed of becoming something extraordinary had achieved more than she had ever imagined possible. But the most important lesson she had learned was that extraordinary achievements came not from being different or special, but from refusing to accept limitations and continuing to push forward when others stopped. The phrase, "Don't make that mistake," had become her personal motto, a reminder that underestimating anyone based on preconceptions was a dangerous error in judgment. The terrorist who had grabbed her throat had made that mistake, and his unconscious form on the floor had served as a powerful reminder to everyone present. In the world of special operations, capability was the only currency that mattered, and Sarah Martinez had proven beyond any doubt that she possessed that capability in abundance. Her story had become legend within the SEAL community, inspiring a new generation of warriors who understood that excellence knew no gender boundaries. The only easy day was yesterday, and tomorrow would bring new challenges that would require the very best from everyone who answered the call to serve. Sarah Martinez had answered that call and had proven herself worthy of standing among the elite warriors of the United States Navy SEALs. Her journey was far from over, but she faced the future with the confidence of someone who had tested herself against the ultimate standards and had never been found wanting.